Brian Glykoff. I used to work at EcoJ, and most of my career I've been a school teacher. I got involved in beekeeping as a teacher. The first bees I kept were in an alley behind the chemistry lab at the school I taught in Chicago. That was part of like a beekeeping collective. I had a mentor. This was about 10 years ago. He was from a Serbian beekeeping family. He taught me a lot. I think this is probably my 9th year of beekeeping overall. I took a break for a year there, but I've kept bees in Chicago, Milwaukee, and now Racine. And I still feel like I'm learning a ton. Like I really don't usually know what I'm doing. But there's a thing they say about beekeepers, that if you ask 5 beekeepers about the best method, you get 7 good answers. I think it's a beautiful kind of combination of science and art. And I don't know, I find it mesmerizing and like very a meditative activity, as long as you don't mind standing still and sweating for long periods of time. It's a wonderful hobby. All right, so this is Olivia. Olivia and Alexis, they came from what's called a package, which is basically just a box of bees. So, but Olivia here has turned out not to be so much of a honey producer, although I do think she'll give me some honey, but more of a brood producer. They both produced brood very early and helped me. I transferred some brood to some weaker hives, and that was very helpful. The other thing I wanted to mention about these two is they're called a Buckfast variety. It's kind of a relatively famous amongst beekeepers. This person, I think it's Brother Tom from Buckfast Abbey. I have his book. He's long gone, but he was very famous in Scotland for his bees and beekeeping methods. And this variety claims to be a Buckfast variety of bee, you know, kind of continually all the way from 100 and however many 30 years ago when Brother Tom was first breeding bees. And they seal every nook and cranny with propolis, which is collected tree sap, and that's why it's always like a big crack and pop when you separate the boxes, because they've sealed every crack. Very efficient, incredibly efficient. Now, this is the bee excluder, and it just so happens that I got stung. Sorry, honey. The queen's abdomen is longer, and she just can't get through these bars, but everybody else can. And so that's the way you contain her, just to the brood box below.
Okay.
In nature, she obviously, she lays inside in the core of the hive in nature, in what's called the brood nest. It's like a teardrop formation inside the larger hive. Usually, the farthest frame on the edges is often or usually all honey.
Okay.
They put the honey on the edges. The honey goes to the edges, it goes to the top. They keep it around the brood nest. So if I were collecting that box, which I'm not, what I would do is I put this back together, put the queen excluder back on, and then this would go on top like this, with this part down. And it's essentially a kind of a simple maze. So what happens is, if it's here and the bees are here up in the honey super, at night they all go down to huddle together, and it's easy to go down because they can just go through this hole and follow the smell, it's easy to find their way down. But in the morning they want to come back up to the honey. It's complicated, and as long as I come back 24 hours later, very few have found their way back up. And then it's very easy to remove a box of honey. There's maybe 100 bees as opposed to 1,000 bees that I need to brush off. It's like a miracle, this tool. So I would call her kind of a medium-large, orangish queen. Wherever she goes, they take care of her, they smell her, they feed her, and then she lays 1,000 eggs a day.
Wow.
At the height of the season.
That's
so
incredible.
Here you can see before they cap it, that's called the larvae stage. So those white things, little white worms. So bees go through a metamorphosis just like caterpillars. They start as larvae, little grubs, and then when they cap it, that's when they're transforming into the bee form. These are these caps, and they're really different from the wax caps that go on the honey. That's honey, but this is brood. And this is brood that is just about ready to hatch. There you can see, you know, this is like honey that's, I don't know, 90% along. But you can see it's not quite ready, but it's close. And so I keep meticulous records of kind of rough percentages so I know when it's time. But this is a really nice example of a sort of a perfect honeycomb. And this is called a honey super frame. There's kind of two basic depths of frame, and these are a little bit shallower. Makes it a little bit easier to, because honey is heavy. These are very heavy. The honey is in all these individual cells, just like perfectly. They bring it down to 17% humidity, and somehow they mysteriously know when it's completely ready, and then they put a wax cap on it. So there's these little wax caps that are holding the honey in, and so if you want the honey out, you have to decap it. So this is a little tool that I use. There's a few different tools. This is a very simple one. It's just called a capping scratcher, and you just kind of poke it up and under, and that removes the caps. That's, that honey is flowing now. You can see it's flowing. So you want to get it into the extractor right away. And we got to do 3 of them at a time. This is a pretty small extractor, just 3 frames at a time. Counterclockwise, that's this way, right? Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah. Give it a spin. Let's see if it's balanced. There you go. Okay, I'm going to start my watch, my clock, because we got to do it for 3 minutes. We'll go a little faster. Yeah, if it starts to really wobble, just slow down. But the faster you go, the more the honey will be flung to the sides. And okay, so this is the side, right? It's all empty. Yeah. And so now we have to do the other side, which a lot of honey has actually also come out of the other side, but that's really good. See how empty it is? Beautiful. So we flip them all around, and they're still pretty heavy. I didn't give you guys a chance to feel how heavy they were when they're full, but it's amazing how much lighter they are. Okay, now we gotta go again. So we've spun it on both sides, and there is a totally empty honey frame. Now there's still like honey residue, and what I'll do is I'll just reuse the frame. I'll give it back to the bees. They'll lick every little bit of honey off of here, and they'll start filling it again. Yeah, so it's totally reusable.
Yeah, it there's a dramatic change to it. And then compare that to the
Should we open the tap now, guys? Let's see. Now, we gotta have some by now. Yeah, we do. We do. Okay, here we go. This is fun. And then once it starts flowing, I just keep going, and I leave the tap open. There it is. There it is. Totally full. I dumped the contents of that bucket into here. So this is probably, I don't know, 70 pounds of honey in this bucket, 60 to 70 pounds. And, you know, bottling is not complicated. Just takes some patience. There it comes. And then you gotta have plenty of bottles on hand, ready to swap it out. And that, you can see that's been nicely filtered. So honey is one of these amazing substances that, you know, it's entirely antibacterial. And so, of course, you need to keep things clean. But filtering is all you really need to do. There you go. There's a bottle there's a bottle of honey. There's this man, Peter Paulus, and at that time he was the head of the Racine-Kenosha Beekeepers Association. And I don't know if he still is. But he gave a talk at the Golden Rondell that I still think about. I think his advice was the best advice. It's basically, if you don't want to keep bees yourself, which it is a commitment, it's not for everybody, you should work on your little bit of land to create the healthiest habitat for bees, grow food for them. And that can be as complex as like planting a bee garden. But even simpler than that, this is where I get a little ornery. You can stop putting pesticides on your grass. That's what he said. Just stop chemicalizing your lawns. And then things will grow naturally with no effort that the bees will eat. Whenever I walk by a perfectly manicured lawn, first of all, I find it ugly myself. It's boring. But to bees, it's a desert. You know, the whole purpose of lawn maintenance was to keep the clover out of your grass. Well, they now make grass seed that intentionally puts low-growing clover in. And the other day I was riding in a Racine Park on my bike, and I'm pretty sure I saw some of this. It was beautiful. It was like a purple lawn. And that's what the bees want. They want things they can eat, and no poisons. So that's my strong advice.
Thanks very much, Brian.